what I find in this day and age is that when a ministry is already well established, for example, like Hillsong, nobody knows that Hillsong belongs to the Assemblies of God, but that's the denomination they belong to. But Hillsong doesn't announce its denominational affiliation. Everybody knows it as plain Hillsong. It has created a brand name for itself, and people trust it because they know the brand name. So in this day and age, when people choose a church, especially some people who were unchurched before, who didn't belong to a church, they're not gonna choose a church on the basis of denomination. They're not gonna say, this church is Methodist and I trust Methodist, I'm gonna go to them. Or this church is this denomination and I'm well acquainted with them, so I'll go to them. Rather, they go to a church where they feel that their spiritual needs are met, where they feel that their questions are answered. And so already many of the evangelical and charismatic churches in America and in Europe are interdenominational. They don't pronounce their denominational affiliation on the surface because they know that for a vast majority of people, denominational label is meaningless. So instead of presenting a name to people that do not have much meaning, they introduce themselves as community churches, or they just don't state their affiliation, and instead they appeal to people purely on the basis of the Word of God they preach and the grace of God that they present to people. In post-Christian societies, denominations have outlived their natural life. There was a time when denominations in themselves said many things. Anglican Church or Lutheran Church or Baptist. Those brands were meaningful to people, but those days are gone because we are in a post-Christian period. Already people have left churches, whether Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist. So at this point, to bring back those denominational labels and say, oh, we are Baptist, come and join us, would not communicate much to people who have already left churches. And so what will bring them back to the faith? It's not the memories of denominations. Already denominations are very old. The Lutheran Church is 500 years old, and Presbyterian Church is also centuries old. And instead of trying to communicate who we are, what we believe on the basis of denomination, we just have to present to them what we believe by the messages we preach, by the way we practice our faith, and by authentic Christian fellowship. I believe that these things will be enough for people to understand what a particular church believes and teaches. And just because a church has a certain label cannot tell people sufficiently what they believe. People have to try them out. It's like going to a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, you try a restaurant, and after tasting the food, you decide If you like the food and will come back, or if you don't like the food, Christian people are just like that. They will have to try a church, attend a service, listen to sermons, and decide for themselves if it meets their needs, if they like it. If so, they will come back. This principle applies to all denominations and all churches, and every pastor. In my book, I said that in mixed martial arts, fighters come from all kinds of traditions, from judo, karate, kung fu, taekwondo, Muay Thai. People come from all kinds of traditions, but on the ring, they fight. They use pretty much same techniques. They fight pretty much in the same way: punching, kicking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu skills, and so ministry is the same way. Churches may have denominational backgrounds, but in ministering to people, ministers require the same skills: preaching the Word of God, praying, praise, and visitation, and discipleship, and fellowship of saints. And these things transcend denominational boundaries. So when people decide whether they like a church and they want to come back, the basis of their decision will be how effective each church is in meeting their spiritual needs. That's the most important thing. Once we are able to meet people's needs, then denominations aren't that important anymore. In Korea, already denominations don't make much difference. And in this age of globalization, pastors adopt teachings and theology from whichever source. They will listen to any popular Bible teacher, preacher. They will follow the ministry example styles of whichever church that is successful, so that ministers have great mixture of theology and mixture of ministry styles, that they don't follow their denominations anymore. They don't necessarily follow what they learned in their seminaries. What they learned since they graduated from seminary plays a bigger role in what they teach from the pulpit and how they conduct their ministry. So in this globalized world, already churches and ministers are crossing the denominational boundaries. So it would be meaningless to ask them, do you teach Presbyterian theology? Do you teach Methodist theology? Are you a Calvinist? Are you an Arminian? Or are you charismatic? Even evangelical? These days, it's almost meaningless to distinguish between evangelical and non-evangelical churches. It's more meaningful to distinguish between effective churches and ineffective churches. So just because a church has an evangelical name doesn't guarantee that it will be effective. So all churches adopt whatever methods, whatever style of ministry, and whatever teachings that will appeal to people. Ministers are already bidding farewell to denominationalism out of necessity. Out of necessity, not so much out of conviction, but out of necessity, which means that each pastor has to adopt a method that will work for them.